All right, in this video, we're going to implement our YouTube service so we can actually add YouTube videos. So for every service you're going to support, you're going to need something that can hit the respective API, be it Dailymotion or Vimeo or SoundCloud or whatever, to get additional information about the video, such as its duration or its thumbnail image or its title and stuff like that. So to hit the YouTube API, you're going to want to create a developer account on console.developers.google.com, log in with your Google ID, and then create a new project. So for this project, we'll call this sync player. And I don't really care about any of that. So let's go ahead and hit create. And it'll take a moment to create, so I'll go ahead and pause while this works for me. And now we're created. So make sure we're in the correct project, and what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to enable the YouTube Data API. So come down here to YouTube APIs, go to YouTube Data API, and then simply select Enable. And it'll take a second to enable. And now it's enabled, and it's going to helpfully tell us that we need to create credentials. So let's go ahead and click Go to Credentials. And it's going to give us a form for creating API credentials that'll allow us to hit this endpoint. So select YouTube Data API 3, and then for where we'll be calling the API from, what you'll want to select is web server. Now this dropdown changes sort of the how secure your the credentials it's going to generate are. Based off of if we're invoking it directly from a browser, which is considered insecure because every person who goes to your web page is going to get your API key. Or if we're invoking it from something like a web server, which is secure because, well, in an ideal world, none of your clients have access to your web server or source code. So we're going to select web server. And as far as what data will we be accessing, I'm going to go ahead and select public data. So this just allows us to query the public data for a video. Whereas if we did user data, it would allow us to allow a user of our application to give us permission to access their private data. But we'll do public data. And then all the way at the bottom, or do I get an add button? Okay, that was weird. That weird that thing there was that button that was saying which one should I choose was apparently the submit button. This is a new console. They just revamped it a little bit. Anyway, I'll go ahead and leave the defaults here on server key 1, and I do want to try to create an IP. Yeah, okay, so I can create the key without specifying an IP address, and here is my API key. And by the time you guys watch this video, this key will be deactivated. So so yeah. But now that we have the API key, let's go ahead and make sure it's on our clipboard. And then I'm going to select Done. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at how we can use the YouTube API without having to write any code yet. We just want to get an idea of how it works. So our goal is to have a video, to get a video URL, a video ID, and get information about that video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Postman. Postman is a fantastic tool for testing APIs and getting an idea of how to work with RESTful APIs or just normal HTTP APIs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys the YouTube endpoint and how we can use it to get information about any particular video we might be interested in. So it's really, really dead simple. We're going to make a GET request to https youtube.com, or sorry, https www.googleapis.com youtube/v3/ well, it's already auto completing for me, so it's kind of cheating, but video IDs, or sorry, videos ID equals followed by not our API key but a YouTube ID, a YouTube video ID. So let's get information on this video, and then simply say and key equals, and let's go ahead and get my key again. And key equals that, and then we want to ask it for particular information. So let's just start off by saying part equals snippet, and let's see what it with an E. Let's see what that returns. So let's send this request. And if I go ahead and do body pretty, we will get information on that video. So right now we're just getting the snippet, and the snippet is going to contain the published at, channel ID, title, description. It's going to contain thumbnail information, tags, channel ID, category. Yeah, the snippet is pretty large, but that'll give us all that information. But we also want some more information. So I'm going to do snippet, comma, content details, comma, statistics, and status. And let's query this again. And now we get a lot more information, like content details, which includes the duration in this weird date-time format, but we'll be able to parse that with Moment. Dimensions, its definition, so on. We get status, like upload status, its license, and is it embeddable, and so on. And statistics, such as view count, like count, and so on. And we can use all this information in our app. So, like I said, dead simple to work with. So now that we have an idea of what we're going to get back from YouTube, let's go ahead and write our service. So I'm going to close out of Postman entirely. And we're just going to go ahead and jump on over to our source server services YouTube. And I'm going to do a couple things here. I'm actually going to, before we write this, I'm going to write a helper method that we're going to be using. And it's going to be called getJSON. So we're going to write a kind of a wrapper around the request library from Node that we'll have to import through npm.js. But what I want to do is I want to write a method that returns an observable that goes out and does an HTTP request and then returns JSON. So to start this off, we need to go ahead and install the request npm package. So npm install request -- save. Now, it's important since we're installing a new npm package that we restart our gulp dev task. Because remember, the Webpack configuration for our server enumerates everything under node modules to know which modules should not be imported directly into the Webpack bundle. So after we add this package reference, we can close that out, come back here, and close and stop this process and restart it. But anyway, now that we have the request node API, which you can go to npmjs.org, you can look at the request documentation. It's a fantastic library for doing network requests. Yes, I know network request support is built into Node itself, but the request npm package makes it so much easier to work with. So after we do that, I'm going to open up lib, and I'm going to create a request.js file. And this is simply going to say import observable from rxjs, and then I'm going to import request from request, and then I'm going to export function getJSONMoney URL, which is simply going to return new observable, observer goes into, and then I'm simply going to say request, which is the request method from the request library, request URL, and then pass in a callback that takes in an error, a response, and a body. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if error, observer, error, error. So I'm just passing that through into Reactive Extensions, then immediately return. Otherwise, observer next, JSON parse, body, and then observer.complete. So again, like I said, it's a very, very simple wrapper around requesting a JSON file. With that done, we can now finish our YouTube service. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that one more time if you guys want. Otherwise, we are going to close this window and finish our YouTube service. So we're going to need to import some stuff. I need to import Moment for Moment. We'll use Moment to parse YouTube's format for duration. We're going to import underscore from Lodash. And we're going to import getJSONMoney from back up lib up request. And then we're going to import YouTube regexes from shared validation playlist. Remember that YouTube regexes export for getting that URL. And then we'll also want to import fail from shared observable socket. And then finally, we're going to say const YouTube endpoint equals HTTPS www.googleapis.com YouTube v3. And there we go. All right, well, ESLint is really mad at us right now for not using any of these imports, so let's go ahead and make it happy. What I'm going to do is I am going to create a constructor on YouTube service. We'll clean that out first. I'm going to create a constructor that's going to take in an API key, and we'll simply say this API key equals API key. And then on process URL, I'm going to say const match equals, and then I'm going to wrap YouTube regexes with underscore, and say map r goes into URL dot match regex dot find a does not equal null, and then I'm going to say return match this get source from ID money match 1 otherwise null. So what am I doing here? Well, I'm simply looping over all of our YouTube regexes. I'm mapping them by I'm making them match, so trying to match the regex and extract data out of it, and I'm finding the first one that satisfies a particular the particular regex. Then, if we found a match, go ahead and return the result of get source from ID, which we'll write in a second. Otherwise, return null. So get source from ID money is going to take in an ID. Remember, we're extracting the ID out of that regex. Remember, that's the capture group that we had there. Now, get source from ID is simply going to return get JSON money, this build get video URL ID, which we'll write that method in a moment, dot flat map data goes into, and I'm going to say if not data or data items length does not equal 1, then return fail cannot locate YouTube video ID. So if that data wasn't retrieved, then go ahead and show that error. Let's go ahead and open up Postman again so you guys get an idea of the JSON format. So let's go ahead and bring over Postman and let's say send. So remember, whoa, that's not what I wanted to do. Remember, we have this items array that's being passed in. So we're saying if data was returned as null or the item's length is not 1, then we weren't able to get data from YouTube. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and grab some data out of the items. I'm going to say ID, comma snippet, comma content details equals data items at 0. So that's going to extract these objects and these properties out of the data items. So for snippet, let's just go ahead and write this out. So return observable dot of, and we're going to return an object. We're going to say type is YouTube. Thumb is going to be snippet dot thumbnails dot default dot URL. So those are those thumbnails. Where are you? Right here. So default and then URL. That's the thumbnail URL. And then the URL is going to be the ID that we extracted out. And then we're also going to get the title, which is going to be snippet.title or no title, if there was no title on the video. And then total time is going to be, whoops, not equals, colon, moment.duration, content details dot duration dot as seconds. So that's going to be content details, which is down here near the bottom, I believe. Content details dot duration. So this this duration format is understood by moment. So we can use moment to parse that duration format out and get it back as seconds, which the rest of our code understands. Now let's go ahead and write our build get video URL. So that's just going to be a private method here that takes in an ID, and it'll simply be return YouTube endpoint /videos ID equals ID and key equals this.api key, and then we'll also ask for all those parts. So part equals snippet, content details, statistics, and what's the last one we wanted? Status. A lot more information than we need, But I just want to, in case you guys want to display more information about the particular YouTube video, like maybe you might want to show the likes and dislikes, favorite count, and all that stuff, you might want this information to be available. So this is our YouTube service. So let's scroll down real fast. And stuff and things. Let's go ahead and pass in our API key into the constructor and see if it works. So let's jump over to server.js. And then for the YouTube service, I'm just going to pass in that API key that we generated earlier. And then I'm going to save that out. Come back over here to gulp. And it looks like we got a crash. Cannot find module shared validation playlist with 2 L's. The reason we couldn't find it is because it was misspelled. I really need to get better at spelling things. All right, so we're started. Let's jump into our sync player. And check that out. We reconnected and we immediately got our playlist back, and that's really cool. Reconnecting is awesome. And let's go ahead and request a video. So hit add next, hit OK, and check that out. It just got added. And that's just so much fun to do. And our scroll bar is working excellently as well. So yeah, that is our ability to add items. So we're querying YouTube properly, we're sending the correct events, we're getting them all set up in our DOM. We have some basic styling going on. Lots and lots of cool stuff. I think the next thing that we're going to work on is the currently playing item. What item is currently playing, what's the progress of the currently playing item, and all that fun stuff. So obviously, once we get to doing our player, which you can't really see right now, let's reload. Once we get to doing our player, we'll be using all that information to set which YouTube video is playing. But I also really want a visual representation on the playlist of what item is currently playing. So with that, we'll see you guys in the next video.